what we're doing today is I'm going to spend an hour with you where I'm sharing really some of my insights on the idea of the supporting role through infant loss, and really some ways that I think are going to help you to share some more light into parents' darkest moments. So this workshop really came about for me because I've been really noticing my inbox is getting a number of requests from nurses and doulas and group facilitators. Hello. Come on in. So I'm just sharing with you that we'll just kind of let people join in as they can, but just so you know, you have the option to send questions to me as we go through this as well, or to unmute your microphone and ask a question. So yeah, so I've just really been noticing kind of this trend where I was just getting a lot of requests and collaborations and people looking for consult on some of the work that they're doing. And it really just reminded me of, both the earlier times in my loss when I was looking for supports and looking to connect with other providers, and of what this one woman had shared with me, where she had literally sent me a screenshot of one of the textbooks that she had had during her training. And she had said that in all of her training on loss, really there was just one section in one chapter of the text that really specifically addressed infant loss. And I know that that certainly varies from training to training and place to place. And I know there's a lot of people out there doing a lot of really good work to make sure that, all of their team members feel really equipped and confident in this work. But I know that it's also one of those topics that, partly because it's so taboo and because it's so difficult, I feel like there's always really room to really just deepen and grow our work. So that's why I've decided to offer this today. And I'm really sharing my perspective, both from my personal experience and from my work of working with other teams and also clients through this. So I'm just going to open up my slides here so you can take a look at what I'm doing as we move through this. And can everyone still see me okay? Can you see me at the side of the screen? Okay, perfect. So this is really the right place for you. If you are a doctor, a doula, a midwife, a group facilitator, a peer supporter, or you're someone that's just really interested in getting into this helping field in some way or form, this place is for you today, because what I'm going to be sharing, I believe that even though we're often working in really different contexts, some of the questions that I get from people in these various different fields really often fall into, the same category. We want to look at really how we offer people support that actually eases their pain and making sure that we're not adding to that. And so what I'm going to be walking you through today is what I think are really 3 key things that are going to help you to hold space for people in ways that I think are really practical and more effective, and have certainly helped me in my work, as well as to help create more connection, both between the parents and the baby, as well as parents and other people who have gone through this experience as well, and even with you side by side as you're moving with them through this work. We're also really going to be looking at how to get rid of some of the stuff that I think really gets in the way of us being able to do our best work, and that, is really a universal challenge that we all have. So as we move through the next hour together, and I'm just going to check my time here from time to time, I have a few invitations for you. So first off, you're welcome to ask me questions. I totally welcome interruptions, so feel free to just raise your hand and let me know if you have a question. And you're also welcome to share your comments as well. So I know that really there's a lot of wisdom on this line already. And I know that from the emails that I've received, like I said, there's doctors and midwives and doulas and very seasoned people doing this work at really expert levels. And so people are really invited to, add in their own thoughts and their own perspectives of things in the chat box as well as we go. And I totally welcome that. You're also invited to really take what you like and leave what you choose. So obviously, if I was having this conversation really intimately on a one-to-one basis or on a direct team basis, we might be moving through some of the specifics of how this stuff really directly pertains to the work that you're doing and some of the nuances and specifics around that. Here, I'm really just offering some general things that I think are going to really enhance all of that work. But you really know for you what feels right, both for your style and for your needs. You're also welcome to share this with your teams or to share this with anyone else you feel like would benefit from this. I am going to be sharing the replay and some other resources with you via your inbox once this is all uploaded and done. And lastly, I would really like to invite you to honor your decision to be here, whether you're watching on the line or whether you're watching later on the replay. And I'd like you to just check in for a moment of really, what was your reason for even signing up for this today? What made you feel like this was going to be a good use of your time and energy to do this? And what is it that would make this feel like it's been a really good use of that time to be here? And feel free to just message me or raise your hand and let me know what really is the most important thing for you that you're wanting to get out of this. And that said, I'm going to encourage you again to do anything else that you need to do to be comfortable and give yourself this time. So whether you want to turn off the alerts, because I know there's always about 50 other things competing for our attention at any given moment, whether you want to quickly run and grab yourself a glass of water so you don't have to be distracted by that later, and definitely get a notebook and a pen and paper, because often I'm asked to kind of go back over things later, and while I'll certainly be sharing the replay with you and I'm happy to answer questions, I am going to be guiding you through really some written exercises as well. So just to begin with, I want you to just kind of write it down and also share with me, if you're comfortable to do so, what made you decide to sign up for this today? Just let yourself have that bit of a check-in. Thank you. So I want to share with you just a little brief bit of my story. So for those of you who are not familiar, I'm April Boyd. I'm a psychotherapist by trade, and I'm also the mother of Nora, a little girl who I met very briefly, but who has forever changed my life and the way that I live and the way that I work. And I had been one of those statistics that really just experienced totally unexpected loss after my little girl was born. There was no warning signs during our pregnancy. Everything looked fine. And after 8 hours after she was born, she simply just stopped breathing in my arms. And to this day, no one has really been able to answer that question of why that was. It was just really one of those struck by lightning kind of statistics. So it was at that time that I really made a promise that I wanted to do everything that I could to really help people to feel less alone in this work. And that was, for me, where I really realized both the magnitude of how absolutely huge and devastating and crippling this loss really was, because I certainly had to, I was very grateful for the fact that I had been working as a therapist for about a decade, because what I knew to be absolutely true was that this was the kind of thing that changes people. I absolutely knew that this was the kind of thing that was just massive. And I feel very grateful for that knowledge that my clients had shared with me, because I knew enough to really take this very seriously. And I feel like that was almost one of the privileges that I had that not everyone has moving through this. We live in such a taboo culture when it comes to loss, that I think a lot of women and couples really get the message to kind of just tuck that away and be over that now. And I think I really knew enough to truly give this experience the real respect and time and attention that it deserved. So after I took a considerable amount of time off work to get my own head on straight and to go back to some of the basics of my training and have to really start to apply that in my own life in a way that I never thought I would have to do, and really figure out what works and what didn't through that process, I really began to dedicate a lot of my efforts and energy into helping people through this and helping people to feel not so alone through this, and trying to create really a cultural dialogue around this taboo topic. So currently my supports and my programs are reaching people in 24 different countries. I'm hosting retreats in 3 different countries, and I am grateful to be working with clients and supporting people across the globe and seeing that my little girl's legacy is really moving into what I'd hoped that it would be for her, which is really a legacy of light. And so I thank you very much for being on this call with me, because I definitely, this is a part of me fulfilling my little girl's work as well. So I thank you for that. So the first thing that I want to be guiding you through, oh yeah, the other thing I was going to say, the other reason, for those of you that maybe join a little bit later, I was saying that the reason for me to create this workshop for you today was I just really started to notice this trend of a lot of service providers, whether they were group facilitators or doulas or midwives or nurses, really reaching out to me, asking me for additional support or asking me for consultation or kind of wanting to run some ideas by me. And I realized that, you know, this is such a taboo topic. And I think one of the results of that is that sometimes even the work of this, it's almost like this parallel process where the person going through the loss is often really pushed to the sidelines of society. And oftentimes the people moving through and supporting somebody through this loss does not necessarily have all of the support that they could benefit from as well. And I think these two isolating factors sometimes go hand in hand. And so I just began to think back to when I lost my little girl. My health team was lovely, but I remember my midwife saying to me, which I thought was really lovely and honest. And I remember her saying to me, you know, I'm really sorry, but I don't know what to offer you and I don't know where to send you right now, but I'm going to find out. And, you know, as I was just getting some of these requests lately for looking for a little bit more support, it just really took me back to that conversation with my own midwife team. And my team was lovely in that they did do some research to try to find some supports to offer me. But I was aware of the fact that they definitely did not have that in their back pocket ready for this kind of thing, which I think is especially risky and a vulnerable position to put a worker into or a support person into. Because really we know that 1 in 4 pregnancies are going to end in miscarriage. And, you know, for my statistics of neonatal loss, the last time I checked, it was somewhere around 3 in 1,000. So while we can certainly hope that nobody really has to be confronted with this in the moment, my experience certainly told me that that happens in real time, probably way more often than we would like it to. So the first thing that I really want to offer you in practical terms as we look at support strategies is to really just notice the pressure that we all carry inevitably on our shoulders to really have that positive impact for the person that we're working with. I think on some level, we're all just kind of intuitively aware of the fact that when we are joining with somebody in their darkest moments, there is this huge pressure and responsibility that comes with that, because we know inherently that in these moments, we have the power to either add to or ease somebody's pain. And the reality is that that is a huge weight to carry. And when we don't really throw that pressure or that thought out into the daylight, I think it can kind of just get carried with us. So what I really invite people to do is to notice that pressure, notice that good, caring, good care provider part of you that really wants to do right by our clients and patients, that really wants to be able to alleviate some of their pain. And I want you to notice that, but I want you to be careful about the idea of letting that guide your conversations. And what I mean by that is I think that without even realizing it, and I certainly know, or what comes up for me when I see a lot of the questions that come in around, you know, what do I say to someone who's gone through this? And what, you know, what are the words that I even tell somebody in some of these horrific moments? And I want to just acknowledge that even that question itself, while a completely valid one, almost kind of envelopes or conceals this underneath sense of pressure that somehow as the care provider or as a support person, we're supposed to be able to really create these almost Oprah aha moments, right? And I think this is what we see kind of happening when people talk about the idea of getting really annoyed and frustrated when their family or their friends or their care providers or their doctors have offered them kind of these cliche kind of things of saying, well, you know, at least you weren't farther along, or at least, that baby didn't suffer, or at least you can try again, or God just wanted another angel, right? That when we look at this, in each of those moments when we're really offering something with that intention of trying to alleviate their pain, there's a risk that what we're really doing is almost just carrying this pressure on ourselves that I have to make this better for this person in this moment. And when it comes to the work of loss, this really sacred, really deep, really vulnerable work for both client and supporter, both, I think we have to be really careful that we're not carrying that pressure into those conversations. So, because here's what this actually looks like in action. If you've not seen the movie The Wizard of Oz, one of the key moments in this movie is they have this wizard who is the main important person in this village, and his role is to really be the person who gives a good advice and who really knows what's what. And because of that pressure, one of the things that he does is he creates really this facade, this smoke and mirror, larger than life facade with literally smoke and lights and images to really make himself bigger than he really is. And I think that when we look at, and when I think about, some of my own experiences as a therapist and as a student learning this work, and when I think about some of my interactions that I've had with some of my colleagues and co-therapists at different times, I think the reality is we have to own the fact that this phenomenon is real. It shows up for us because we all really wear that weight on our shoulders that we're supposed to somehow make this better. And I think this operates on two fronts. If you're someone who has lived through the experience of loss, there's almost this implicit expectation that you should know what to say because you've been through it. And I certainly know from the comments and emails that have been sent to me, even about this workshop, one of the key concerns that people have identified, which I think is totally valid, that what has worked for me might not work for somebody else. And so it's kind of this double-edged sword in a way. And when we're a professional, there's absolutely this expectation, just by nature of our position, that we're supposed to know the right thing to say. We're supposed to get it right. And while I absolutely believe in both that accountability and responsibility around that, I also feel like if we really let that run unchecked, that pressure, we end up posturing up. We end up really armoring up in some of these moments with our clients, where what we really need to be doing is getting rooted and getting grounded. And so this is my hope for the points that I'm going to be sharing with you today, is that it allows us to really get rid of that idea of needing the armor, needing that pedestal in some ways, which I know none of us want, but it's just that cultural expectation that kicks in around us. And instead really allowing ourselves to get grounded in our own wisdom and our own strength and our own knowledge in these spaces. Because this is what it looks like in action. And we know that this gets weird, right? So for instance, as I think back to some of my own experience of loss, I have witnessed how when somebody is coming into the room with that amount of pressure on them, it absolutely changes the dynamic of the work between the two of us. So for instance, I'll share a story from my own personal life as an example. I had a friend who had done a lot of the same training I had done. We had worked in some of the same settings over the courses of our career. And when I lost my little girl, I think she really felt an enormous pressure to get it right for me, to really somehow be able to carry me through this in really a way that was not realistic or human. And so what this looked like in real life, this looked like conversations that she would have with me where we're sitting across the table, and it looked like she had Googled what to say to me. And I say this with love, and I say this without judgment. Maybe it's not judgment, I don't know, I'll let it fly. But it looked like she had Googled what to say to me, because even though she was saying, the right things, she was nowhere in the room, really. I could feel the disconnect. I could feel that she was up in her head and not really with me at the table. And I think this is what happens when we carry this pressure into the room with us or into that space with us with a client, because we cannot simultaneously be in two different places at the same time, our head and our heart, right? So we really want to equip our head as much as possible before we get into the room. But once we're in there, it has to be all from the heart, because otherwise we miss the whole point and we trip over all other kinds of things that I'm going to walk you through in a minute. And so for me, one of the things that has helped to ground me in my work really from day one as a therapist is this model that I had come across in the early days of my training, which is based on the acceptance and commitment therapy model by Stephen Hayes. But it was this metaphor of the mountain that always stuck with me. And he had this incredible way of describing the stance of the therapist in his model, or we could apply this to any form of helping professional, which is, I'm climbing my own mountain. I'm really just a human being, and I'm climbing my own mountain over here because that's the reality of life. I don't always know every answer. I don't always get it 100% correct. But from the place that I am on my mountain over here, I can look over and I can see you on your mountain, and I can maybe offer, hey, there's a boulder just coming up in front of you around the corner. Or, you know, the path I went up to was kind of like this. Maybe you want to try this and this and this. And so when we look at this, so just go check the chat. Absolutely. Yep. Feel free. And I'm going to share this. The question is, can I take a photo of this? So absolutely feel free to screenshot as we go. And this really, I remember I learned this during my master's program, and it was always something that I hung on to, because the reality is we know the work that we're doing is precious. And if you're showing up into this space, obviously you are someone who takes that responsibility seriously. And while all of that is valid, we have to somehow be able to simultaneously hold these two spaces, right? And so for me, I'll give you an example of how this kind of showed up for me recently. I was actually just last month, I had a couple approach me for some counseling work, and they were coming to me because the wife had recently been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and they did not know how long she would have to live. And when I met with them for the first time, they were telling me, they were filling me in a little bit about really just the facts and the data, and they shared with me the diagnosis. It was something I'd never heard of in my life. I had never heard of that diagnosis. So in that moment, I had a choice, right? I could either kind of nod along and pretend I had any clue what they were talking about, which I did not, or I could do what I did, which was I stopped and I said, I'm really sorry, but I've never heard of that. And when you just take a guess of what you think their response might have been, how you think they might have responded to the idea of their therapist saying to them, I don't know what you're talking about, basically. So what they said was, well, of course you wouldn't have. There's only 5 other people who are diagnosed with this disease, and our own doctor didn't even know about this until the specialist informed him. So can you imagine what would have happened to my working relationship with these clients if I had somehow given into that pressure, because that's always there, to really want to show that I'm competent and I know what I'm doing? If I had given into that pressure of kind of armoring up in that moment and pretending that I knew what they were talking about, I would have broken their trust. They would have knew I was lying, and really we might as well just ended our whole session and called it a day right then and there. So this is what I offer you, because I just really want you to keep in mind, people don't need you to be the all-in-mighty powerful Oz of all things. They do need you to be there in the room with them. And so one of the things that I always say to people when I'm first meeting with them in really any capacity is, hey, you know what? I've got my training. I've certainly got my experience. I've done a lot of this work, but I'm well aware that really what I might be offering might not really fit best for you. And so I think of this work as being really 50-50. So I might say, here's what I think we should try, or here's what I'm wondering about from here. But you're the one that really knows to say, April, you're way off. My spouse would never go for that, right? Or whatever that is, that really, so we can make sure whatever we're doing is effective. And I just really want to offer you to really give yourself permission to own that stance and let yourself really think about what this would feel like for you, to really notice that that pressure's there, because it's always coming with you, but really allow yourself to step out of that. So This was another one of the little gems that I found early on in my career that I've always carried with me and that I offer to other people doing this work as much as I can. It's this beautiful quote from Maya Angelou that says, "People will forget what you said. They will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel." When you think about my conversation that I shared with you with my friend who really was up in her head instead of sitting at the table with me, what do you imagine the feeling was for me in that moment? So even though I'm in the state of numb, even though I'm in the state of devastation, I'm aware of the weird dynamic that's taking place, because the reality is we feel it when someone is not there with us. If you are not totally convinced of this, go home today and tell your spouse everything about this workshop as you can in as much detail as possible. And you are going to notice the moment when they disconnect and go somewhere off in their head, right? We feel it when people separate from us. So if we can really just ground ourselves in this, I think this idea really goes a long way. So what I hope to really share with you today is how to really hold space with people, how to really enhance that connection, both with everybody involved, the baby, the support provider, and other areas of support, and what I call calming the crazy thoughts, because that certainly is a practical part of this work as well. So when I think of the idea of holding space, I think this is one of these abstract concepts that really doesn't get flushed out in the way that it really needs to. What I believe we're talking about when we're holding space is really the idea of witnessing this experience, validating that this experience is as absolutely worthy of the devastation or the hurt or the confusion as it really is. And that connection piece that I've described, this is really, I think, what we're doing when we're holding space. And especially when we look at the idea of infant loss, I feel like all of us who are really doing this work, in my opinion, are really kind of the trailblazers of this work in many ways, because when I think of my mother and my grandmother, and really, my mother assured with me permission to share that really for her, it was considered to be that the kindest thing that you could do for somebody who had gone through a miscarriage or the baby loss was essentially just to help them move on as quickly as possible. So you weren't supposed to hold the baby, you weren't supposed to name the baby, you were really just supposed to really encourage that person to move on. And, I'm really stunned in my work to see how prevalent that idea still is in some hospitals and in some settings. And it is certainly still there culturally and in our social support network. And if you don't believe that that is true, I challenge you to go into some kind of card store and try to find a card that is a sympathy card for miscarriage. I check this out in every store that I go to. I have never found one in any kind of mainstream shop. So this idea of really witnessing this privilege that we have as a care provider or as a support resource to really be there in somebody's experience of loss, I think is an absolute privilege and an absolute gift. Someone's just saying that they hate that word miscarriage. It's true. And I always have as well. I don't know what to call it otherwise. I guess we could say pregnancy loss, but really it feels strange, right? It really kind of puts us onus and responsibility on the woman's body and on the woman's experience of this that I think just really feeds into some of that loss of a baby. Yeah. And I think and I just want to acknowledge as well, so someone is suggesting that really the kinder language and more inclusive language in many ways might be the loss of a baby. And I certainly know that's true, from my own experience. And when I'm talking to women, they talk about the loss of their baby. But I know that this also creates a bit of a conundrum sometimes for people that are working with clients in some of the ER settings, or during the birth, or during the loss, or in hospital settings sometimes, because I do want to acknowledge that there are really those women who do go through the loss of a baby and really say, statistically, one of the studies I read put it at about 25%. 25% of the women who go through the loss of a baby will say, that was just a miscarriage. That was just my body doing what it needs to do. This was not my baby. That's not my son, and I absolutely will try again, and that will be fine. And for them, that is peace for them, and that works for them. So from my mind, I think this is one of the challenges that healthcare provider gets, is that we really don't want to misinterpreting or miscreating meaning for somebody that may or may not be there. And this is what I think is really one of the key things about really holding space for someone. So even these questions of, what do you call the baby? Right? And really following that line for them. And so that might be, I know some people who have lost babies at about 5 weeks who say, this is my baby Benjamin. He will always be my son. I will mourn him until the end of time. And they were 5 weeks along. I know somebody who really has lost a baby way later that said, you know what, that was just nature doing its thing. And really my son is over here, right? And they don't identify having 2 children. So this is the challenge that we face really as care providers, to really know where someone stands on that. And so this is where I think this idea of really letting ourselves hold space for someone really allows us to follow their need. So one of the things that I really encourage in this space, when we look at what does this mean in practical terms, how does this function in practical terms, I think one of the things that I use a lot is the idea of mirroring. So it sounds kind of silly because it's almost so simple, but when we really look at this, if I say to someone, how are you doing today, right? How are things? And they say, awful. I don't even know. This is just awful. And if I say to them, yeah, this is really awful. This is really awful, isn't it? I've just stayed with them in that moment. I've just really kept right side by side with where they're at. And in that space, I have that opportunity to maybe explore with them a little bit of where do they land on that continuum in terms of what this means for them, right? As long as we're really just keeping space beside that person. And when we think about this, even just in terms of how we spend so much of our conversations in our daily life, the reality is, I think so often, and I'm guilty of this as well, there's times when we're listening to somebody, but we're basically just waiting to say what we want to say, right? We're basically just thinking about what it is that we're going to say next. And so this idea of really holding space for someone, especially when we're looking at the idea of going through trauma and devastating loss, is an enormous gift to be able to offer someone. Because one of the key frustrations that I hear from people most that frustrates them and causes them pain is when someone almost just really kind of pushes them into trying to focus on the positive or trying to focus on the bright side. And I think that when we really look at why we're doing that, yes, it's awful to see someone who is in pain, but it's also really difficult to sit with someone who is in pain without being able to apply a Band-Aid on it and somehow make it better. That takes a lot of guts. And so this is what I'm saying when I say we really want to get grounded and not armored up for that. So one of the strategies that I like to offer just to make this really quick and easy is really what I call the spotlight check. Because in any given moment, this cannot be in 2 different places. So we're either shining the spotlight on my worries, my anxieties, what I want to say, what I want to don't say. Am I being the best therapist I can be? Do I have the right words for them, right? I can shine the spotlight on that place, or I can shine the spotlight on them. And we know that whenever we have conversations with somebody, we know what happens when our mind wanders. We know what happens when we disconnect, right? We're missing stuff. We're tapping out. So if we take nothing else from this quick little spotlight idea of saying, okay, for instance, I had a client I was talking to, she'd gone through loss, and then she was going through more loss because she had recently heard that a family member of hers was terminally ill. And she said, I have this card sitting on my desk and I haven't sent it yet because I don't know what to say. And I said to her, Absolutely, right? Because it's one of those things of what words are going to be good enough. How do you express in one card everything that this person has meant to you and everything that you're feeling about the fact that you're really saying a very tragic goodbye for them? I said, but here's the thing. If you wait until you have the perfect words for that, you're going to wake up one morning, you're going to get the call that that person is gone, and that card is still going to be sitting on your table. And that is going to be an absolutely wretched feeling to have. So even if you send nothing more than "I'm thinking of you and I love you," stamp on send, that is still going to be better than doing nothing at all, because we're trying so hard to get the right perfect thing. And I think that especially when we're talking about people going through the loss of the baby, one of the things that shocked me most of my experience and made me really passionate about being there for other people is there really are these crazy things that happen in our social circle. There's people that you expect who are going to be able to step in there and really be a part of that experience with you, but that's hard to do. And so the reality is that there is so much alienation. There is so much discomfort that comes for this, because so many people get so hung up on doing the right thing that they do nothing at all. And that's really tragic, because it means that people are going through another layer of loss. The other really practical thing that I like to encourage people to think about is to offer concrete reassurance that this is not their fault. And this is really what I'm talking about when I say the idea that we want to really help calm the crazy thinking. And it sounds funny to put it in this way, but here's what I know to absolutely be true. One of the universal experiences for every single person I've ever talked to who has gone through loss, including my own self, we absolutely carry the guilt with us that somehow this was our fault. I've never met anyone who's gone through this who has not carried that in some way or form, whether that's maybe I didn't do enough during my pregnancy. Maybe I did not start the vitamins early enough. Maybe my showers were too hot. Maybe I exercised too much. Maybe I worked too much. Maybe I was too stressed. Or maybe somehow I'm just a really horrible person deep down on the inside, and this is really just punishment for something I don't even know about. Right? And so this is really the universal experiences. So I'll share with you, I was quite grateful because I remember the doctor who was working to resuscitate my daughter turned to me and said at one point, "You're going to go home and you're going to feel like this is your fault. You're going to feel guilty about this, but this is not your fault." And I remember, even though I was aware that truly he was saying this just because he knew well enough to know to say this to me, I was really grateful that he said that. And those words have stayed with me. Hence, I'm even saying them now 5 years later. But the other thing that I would offer that would really deepen that and supercharge that kind of thing is if we can add on something that makes that really tangible and evidence of proof. Because all those crazy thoughts in our head that really are playing 24/7 all day long, right? Get really creative and really imaginative about why this is our fault. And while that was really nice that he said that to me, part of me believed he was saying that just because he was a good doctor and just to be nice. If he had said, "April, I know you're going to feel guilty. This is not your fault. 3 in 1,000 women are going to lose a baby this way, and we don't know why that is," I would have had something tangible to counteract that kind of little demon in my voice, right in the back of my head, talking to me at 4 a.m., being like, maybe your showers were too hot. Maybe you exercised too much, right? Whatever that is. So try to make this tangible. And so that might even be like using statistics like this. This might even be using phrases like saying, "You know what, there's no such thing as a certain pregnancy. You're going to go home and replay everything you think you could have done differently. But sometimes this is just what happens," right? Whatever that is, to add on to that. And when I talk to people who are working with somebody in a peer support capacity, where they say, really, what can I offer that person this moment? When they're feeling like they have not done enough right during their pregnancy or to take care of their baby. So those things like, maybe I should have gone to the hospital sooner. Maybe I should have done this differently. Maybe I should have advocated for myself more when I felt like something was off. I think what we're really talking about is people just expressing that feeling of guilt. And we can sometimes say, this sounds a little crass to describe it this way, but I think it helps sometimes for people to put it in perspective. And I don't mean judgment of this, because again, I guess I know we're all climbing our own mountain, but sometimes if someone is saying to you something like, you know what, like maybe I didn't take my vitamins the way I should have, sometimes it's helpful to hear, you know what, I remember my sister saying this to me, which is why I'm using this example. April, she said, there are women who have injected heroin into their bodies every single day during their pregnancy, and their kid is at kindergarten right now playing with their friends. So we can't go into this place of beating yourself up for all of those what ifs. And it sounds really drastic to kind of say it this way, but it was actually crazy the amount of peace that offered me, right? Because in our mind, we're trying to replay how we could have got it better, how we could have got it right. The next thing I want to offer is really, if we follow this concept will really change how you interact with your clients or your patients. We really want to be following the emotion and not the words. So for instance, someone had sent me in the question to say, you know, how do I respond when I have a mom say to me, why did God do this to me? Why was my baby taken, right? And I really just want to point out, I know that these are kind of deer in headlight moments that happen for us when we're faced with really these huge existential, huge overwhelming, huge unanswerable questions, which really is the nature of helping someone through loss. But if we really use this as our compass, we want to follow the emotion of what someone is saying and not the words. Because the emotion in this moment is what? If someone's saying to you, why did God do this to me? The emotion that they're expressing to you might be despair, might be guilt again, right? And this is what we really want to be addressing. People know, and this is where it goes wonky, we can't really address those other questions, right? So unless someone is truly having this capacity to you because you're their minister and really raises that question, that might be a different conversation. But in all of these other kinds of things of why me, or, you know, I don't know how I'm ever going to get through this, or whatever that is, it sounds funny to say this, but I really do believe we have to really look at the idea that that's not a real, genuine question that they're asking. They are not expecting you to turn to them and say, well, here is how you're going to get through this. Even if you try, that's going to just land totally on the ground beside you and do nothing. What you really want to be doing is helping that emotion. I know, this is so painful. Yeah, right. This is totally hard to make sense of. This is impossible to make sense of. I know, none of this makes sense. This is just so devastating. And if we do that, then we're able to hold the space for that person. Sorry, I just hear my little dog kind of going crazy at the door, so I'm going to let her aside. 1 second. So the last key thing that I want to offer is really, I believe that one of our roles is to help people create connection, to create connection with their baby and to create connection with other people who are going through this. And so I've just included a few resources here that I believe really are incredible. So the Lay Me Down to Sleep Foundation is volunteer photographers that can go in and take pictures of the baby. But I know midwives and doulas that have been creative and nurses who have literally just implemented that they have a camera where they're allowed to, they work it out, where they're allowed to really just take pictures of if the parents want them. And I would really encourage people to really encourage the parents to do this. Because when it's all said and done, we don't want to leave people with more regrets of all the stuff that they missed. And so when I was going through my loss, I'll just share with you from my direct experience, because we're kind of, you know, in this awful shock of it all, and we're really in the hurricane of it all, I didn't know to take pictures, right? That thought did not even cross my mind. And I'm super grateful for the fact that my sister had thought to do that. And if it wasn't for her, I would have nothing, right? Literally, I would have all of this drawing that I did. That's it. That's what I would have. And there's things like mold making kits where really you can just do a little imprint of the hands or feet. And that's available for like $10 on Amazon. My baby loss survival guide, I offer a one-for-one model. So if people have clients or people they're supporting who really are in financial need, and that's a barrier to them getting the kind of quality of support that they're looking for, I really do a buy one, share one model. So I'm always happy to connect people with that. In terms of the group support and for people who are facilitating groups and doing support in those kinds of ways, I think that one of the things that's valuable to always weave into that is that same thread. We want to be creating memories, and we want to be really honoring their experience of the mother of this baby or as the parent of this baby, because that's the thing that really is going to be missing for them for this point forward. So sometimes I'll do a random act of kindness event where I'll really just invite people to come out and do random acts of kindness in memory of Nora. And for me, it allows me to feel a little closer to my girl in those moments. I'm just checking the comments here. So the question is there anything I can do to make parents aware that this could happen? Would it have alerted you in your own experience, or do I wait until it's happened? I think this is a really, really good, important question. And I'll share kind of two different perspectives on this. So I was speaking to a doula who said that she was sharing with me her own experience of fear during pregnancy. And she said for her, one of the things that really helped her through this that she now shares with other people is she kind of walks people through the idea of playing out the worst case scenario and helping them to kind of to be less afraid of that. And that absolutely might be beneficial for her, and she might find ways to make that work really well. I tend to think of things as, most of us don't really want these worlds of pregnancy and death to mix a whole lot, right? And so I think that there's a really big aversion to talking about death and to being able to go there. So I think one of the things that we can do is really say to somebody, if something were to happen, how would you like us? What would you like in those moments? And I think that there's times when that can be a little bit a part of it sounds funny to say a little bit a part of the birth plan, a little bit a part of the pregnancy plan that is both a little terrifying, but also probably a little bit valuable as well. Because the reality is that sometimes stuff does go wrong and stuff does happen. But I think in terms of really making people aware that this could happen, I think on some level, I think that's a cultural conversation, really. Because, for me, I had really thought I was in the clear once I was past my 12 weeks, right? We have this kind of narrative that says if you're 12 weeks in, everything's safe and you're good to move forward. I truly believe that. You saw that from my photos I shared earlier. I was pretty cocky in the fact that I thought I was good. I did the gender reveal party, right? I thought I was totally safe. So it was absolutely a shock to my system. But I think it would have been a shock to my system even if somebody had tried to talk to me about that possibility ahead of time. I think I probably would have blocked it out and said, nope, that's not going to happen to me, right? Because I wouldn't have wanted to think about that. So I think it might be more of the fact of really helping the support team to be ready for that possibility than it might be about helping the person themselves to be ready for that possibility. That's just really my thoughts on that. And I'm curious about what people's thoughts are even as I say that. But that might be what I might suggest, is that really it's kind of one very tiny part of the conversation. If something were to go wrong, what would you want us to do? I think that's really just good, responsible care. But I think really it's about you being more prepared for if something were to happen. So for instance, having one of those mold making kits on hand, having that little, having some kind of little list of resources. So yeah, because I think about it, if my midwife team would have said that, I would have been like, absolutely not. My baby's going to be fine, right? I'm one of those people that likes to focus on the positive. So The other resource that I've come across is Grieving Dads. And somebody had sent in the question to me as to say, specifically, how do I support dads who really seem to be even farther disconnected from their experience of grief and even more discouraged from having an experience of grief, which I think is totally valid, right? So I think so often when I talk to people about the dad's experience of grief, oftentimes the only thing that people are even saying to him is, how's your wife doing? Right? Make sure you take good care of her. And I think that that is really tragic. So one of the resources that I'm a big fan of is grievingdads.com. Kelly Farley, I did an interview with him that's actually on my site. And he did this really incredible book where he interviewed dads who had lost children at all ages. So from pregnancy loss and baby loss all the way into, adulthood. And I really respected that he had done that because I think it really helped to kind of validate that missing piece that society just hasn't quite totally worked out yet, which is that this loss is just as valid, right? So these are the things that I'm hoping that we can really just keep in mind so that we're not leaving someone ever empty-handed. So, for me, even though my midwife didn't know where to send me, I really appreciated that she said, I'm going to go and find out. But what would have been even better is really if she had had this list that would have felt like absolute proof to me and such a sense of reassurance, especially for me at that time. I had never even hung out on really Instagram or that kind of thing. So I've since become aware of a lot of people doing really wonderful stuff, but I didn't even know to go to those kind of places for support. And honestly, I don't even know if I would have sought that out, if that would have felt like the right place. So to really be able to offer people almost kind of like a menu of options where they can really find the right fit for them, I think really sends a very strong message that you're not alone in this. Thank you. So if anyone has any other questions or any other thing that they'd like to touch on, I'm happy to spend a few more minutes with that. I do just want to honor our time as well. And so I think I've basically addressed all the questions that have been sent in to me so far. Yeah, I hope that really covers that all. So I really, really just want to say thank you for spending this time with me. For me, this is one of the ways that I honor the life of my bright-eyed girl by really sharing as much light as I can. And that was part of that commitment that I made to her, is that I would live my life as brightly as possible in her honor, and I would help others to do the same. And so I so am grateful and really appreciative of being able to spend this time with you, other people who are also really trying to bring more light into the world and more light into this taboo topic. Because I think this really is a field where we are creating trails and we are really creating the system as we go. Yes, I just see that there's a question here.
Oh.
Is it okay if I unmute you?
Oh, hi.
Sorry, it looked like you were raising your hand to ask something.
Oh, yeah, no, I have a question. And I found that all really, really, really helpful, really inspiring. It's really inspired me to include some more stuff in my package, be more prepared. One of the things where I come up against loss a lot is I have clients who book on for their first antenatal hypnobirthing session, and it will come up that they have lost a baby, and the couple are presenting clearly, and they are pregnant, so they're excited and they're looking forward to the next baby. And then I have this moment where I have to hold the space for the baby that's passed, and then I often struggle how I then move on with the excitement of this next baby. And I just wonder if you could share any wisdom on.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful and really important question. And I think that's a really brilliant way to describe it, because you are holding spaces for both of those babies, the one that's coming and the one that was lost. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge, again, to kind of do that check-in. So, I may kind of use language or say something like, so what is this like for you? to be pregnant after you've lost your little one. And I'd really just make that invitation for people to really educate me and share with me their experience and really where they stand, so that I want to have a really good sense of what this does mean for them, right? And how they are carrying this. And I also really want to send a message that this is a safe place for them to bring in both of those. Because I think one of the things that people get hit with so much is, and it's shocking, I think, how much this happens, how much people are told to just be grateful for the new baby that's coming. And everything's going to be okay now because you have this new baby that's coming. And so I think a lot of parents feel an extreme amount of confliction, an extreme amount of guilt, because they feel guilty, like they're somehow betraying the little one that they lost by getting excited about the new one. And they're worried that they're somehow going to be seen as replacing the new baby. And at the same time, they feel guilty for not feeling more celebratory, which is often the case with the new baby coming, because they still feel sad and are working through stuff with their loss. So I think that's exactly it, is you're really holding space for both of those. And I would just be really fleshing that out and just checking in on that. What is this like for you to be going through pregnancy? What are your concerns as you're going through pregnancy after loss? How are other people, responding to you, treating you as you move through pregnancy again after loss? All of that is really going to open up a whole lot of information fast on where they stand.
One of the questions I ask, I don't know whether this is right or wrong, and I say that I say to them that they don't have to answer this question, but I find it quite revealing, because I will say to them that one of the first things that the midwife will ask them is if they've had a baby before. Are you a first-time mummy? And for me, that's quite revealing, their response to that. Even if they tell me what their answer is, or if they don't tell me what the answer is, it's revealing.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is to them that I'm just introducing this idea to you before it happens, before they then think, oh.
I think that's really wise, right? And I think it's really, I think that's a really important thing to check in, and it is really different. And oftentimes that is a huge, both healing and emotionally difficult process to go through pregnancy after loss. And I think for a lot of women, they really feel like that side is kind of ignored and kind of shamed in some ways. You should just be happy and fine now, right? Without acknowledging they're living in constant fear. And so, I'd be asking questions as well, like, as we move through things from time to time, so what are things like, how has it been for you to even feel connected, to your baby that you have right now? I imagine that's a bit scary to do after you've lost a little one, because I think, there's all of those layers of that are both guilt-provoking and really conflictual. I'll often talk to women that will say, you know what, I did not want to have a shower, a baby shower. I did not want to buy anything. I could not even let myself go there because I was so afraid underneath it all that I would somehow be jinxing myself, or that I would not really, it was hard to let myself believe I'd be taking a baby home this time, right? And I think that stuff is so prominent in so many women's experience of pregnancy after loss, for sure. So I think it's neat that you're even just that aware of that. It's very cool. And I really love that question. I use that phrase, really about 100 times a day. Hey, you don't have to answer this, but, or is it okay if I ask? I often preface that kind of stuff because I'm really just acknowledging. People are often feeling a little bit like you're in the position of power, right? In whatever context that is, even if it's just because you're a peer supporter. People feel like they're often obligated to answer. And so I always just really want to send a very clear message to people. This is 50-50 work, right? You're not obligated to go somewhere where you don't want to go. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'll be sending out the recording of this. And if you have any thoughts, or if anyone has any thoughts that come up later for them, or any questions, or feel free to email me. I'm totally happy to to stay connected and respond. And I'll be emailing out that list of just some links and resources. All right, I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Lucy.